Have you ever sat and listened to a speech and someone was talking really, really fast and it made you think they were smart and you were more persuaded by what they were saying? Let's find out why that was the case using the elaboration likelihood model of persuasion. Let's do it. What is going on YouTube? Jamie Potter here, PhD in Organizational Behavior from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Today I'm talking about a very cool topic, and that is, again, persuasion. A few weeks back I talked about the 9 techniques to persuade others. This week I am talking about a sort of more theoretical but nonetheless quite interesting and important topic, and that is the elaboration likelihood model of persuasion, which shows the different routes or channels by which people are persuaded. And what I mean by that is there are actually 2 here. There's a central route of persuasion and there's a peripheral route of persuasion. The central route is when I am persuaded by the arguments somebody makes, right? The rationality of what they're saying. I'm listening to that and I say, oh, okay, I find that convincing. I'm going to change my view to align with the speakers. The peripheral route, though, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, or it's happened to many of us, that's when we're persuaded by things outside of the core argument or just the words being said. So that could be how somebody's dressed or the schools that they went to, or even in the case of this 1995 paper, which I'll dig more into, how fast somebody talks, which I find really fascinating because there's actually a debate at the time in 1995 that this paper was published of whether fast speech is more likely to persuade or less likely to persuade. On the one side of the argument was, if you talk fast, that serves as a credibility cue. It makes you look smarter and more knowledgeable and more well-read, so people will be persuaded more when you talk fast. But the flip side is, if you talk fast, it's a bit harder for people to process, right? So in that case, it can actually be less persuasive, and that's why some say politicians talk a bit slower and more precisely at times, because people hang on every word that they're saying and they're really paying attention and interested and excited, so that can be more persuasive. This paper tries to disentangle when fast speech is more persuasive, because it's not one or the other actually, and it uses the elaboration likelihood model to show this. And so how does it do this, for one? So it's an experiment that they run on a college campus, and they manipulate a number of variables. They're showing a video to the college students on campus. They actually just find students walking around and ask them to participate in an experiment where they watch a video, then answer some questions. And in this video, a number of variables are manipulated. For one, obviously, how fast the speech is, right, of the person talking. In one, there's sort of a moderate rate of speech, in other, it's about 20% faster, so quite quick. It's also manipulating the strength of the argument being made. Is it a really kind of logical, airtight argument, or is it sort of a more specious, kind of emotional argument that doesn't really have a lot of logic behind it? And then the third thing being manipulated, how relevant is it to the audience? Is this a topic that's going to impact them directly, or is it a more theoretical, distant topic that is going to impact maybe people in the future, but not actually them specifically? And so what the paper finds, and what the elaboration likelihood model is looking into, is when does this peripheral route of persuasion take precedence? In other words, when does fast speech actually work to persuade? And it turns out it occurs in 2 kind of logical circumstances. The peripheral route takes precedence when the audience is either not able or not motivated to really elaborate on the message being said. So in this case here, the predictions of the ELM pan out because, as I'll show in the figures here, when the argument is very strong, people are going to just be listening and it makes sense, so they will always be persuaded when the argument is strong. However, when it's weak, the fast speech actually works better because if it's slow speech and a weak argument, I'm really listening to it carefully and I'm able to process it because it's slower. And I'm really hearing, going, okay, this doesn't make sense. But if you have a weak argument and you're talking very quickly, people are not able to process it as well. So they rely on these more peripheral cues, like, oh, fast talker, this person must be smart. I'm gonna listen to what they're saying. Really fascinating and relevant. On the other hand, in this figure 2 here, when the topic is more relevant to people, again, they're more motivated to listen. And so it doesn't matter, they'll be equally persuaded whether the person's talking fast or slow. However, if the topic is less relevant, people are just not as motivated to really elaborate or process, so they rely more on these peripheral cues, in this case, fast speech. So when the topic is of moderate or less relevance and the person's talking fast, you are more likely to be persuaded. And I love this topic because it's very relevant, and I hate to suggest conclusions from the literature with manipulative intent, but this does kind of show if you have a weaker argument for something, or if the audience is not really motivated to pay close attention, in that case, peripheral things outside of just your core argument are going to matter far more for persuasion. So keep that in mind next time you're making a speech. If the audience just doesn't really care, it's not that relevant to them, or if you have kind of a weak argument for things, make sure you dress well, you show your diplomas, things like that, and make sure you talk really fast, because that is going to work better for persuasion. That is it for me. I hope this sort of practical explanation of a pretty complex theoretical topic of elaboration likelihood model was interesting. Please show it was interesting by liking the video below, subscribing to my channel, checking out my other views, and commenting below with other videos or topics you'd like to see in the future. Until then, I will see you next week.